Have you ever noticed that the worst punishment humans have ever created for each other is isolation? From a biological and evolutionary psychology standpoint, being separated from the tribe once meant death. That's why most of us constantly look for connection and feel uneasy in complete silence. But there is a rare group of people who go completely against that instinct. They're not just introverts, the kind of people who need to hide in their shell to recharge, and then come back out looking for understanding. They are a far more complex and independent psychological structure, the self-sufficient introvert. Here's the key difference. A typical introvert may still crave recognition and understanding from others. They just get drained quickly by social interaction. A self-sufficient introvert, they have a self-sustaining mental ecosystem. Society looks at them and labels them as lonely, but in reality, their room has never been empty. It has its own rhythm, its own structure. They create their own value, analyze themselves, and heal themselves, without needing any audience or likes to confirm their existence. They can disappear into personal projects for weeks and come back sharper and more energized than ever. Why does their brain operate with such remarkable independence? And why is this so-called unusual trait actually a high-level psychological advantage? Let's break it down. Instead of seeing this separation as a system bug or social avoidance, try looking at it through the lens of cognitive psychology. Science calls this high internal complexity. Imagine the brain as an information processing machine. For most people, this machine works like a receiver. It needs fuel from the outside world. Conversations, news, drama, busy events. When that supply gets cut off, they feel empty and bored. But for the self-sufficient introvert, the brain works like a generator. They don't need constant external input because inside them is already a massive data ecosystem. When they sit quietly, they're not disconnecting. On the contrary, they're activating highly complex background processes, self-reflection. They replay past situations to extract lessons, debugging, simulate future scenarios, or connect scattered ideas into a new thinking system. These activities burn a huge amount of mental energy, no less than solving a difficult math problem. So when they turn down a party to stay home, it's not fear of people. It's resource management. They need quiet space for their processor to run at peak performance. For them, solitude is not a state of lack or loneliness. It is system maintenance. And this unique brain structure isn't something they were simply born with. It's the result of a developmental process that started very early in life. Their self-sufficiency is a stable part of their personality, lasting from childhood into adulthood. It is not a sign of a psychological disorder or trauma, even though some self-help books or quick judgments might make it seem that way. Picture an elementary school classroom in the US. During recess, most kids run to the basketball court, play tag, or gather in loud groups. But there are usually a few who choose to stay inside the library. They might be reading comic books, building with blocks, or drawing alone. They're not sad. They're simply focused on what they enjoy. Adults sometimes worry about these children. A teacher or parent might think, "Are you okay? Why don't you go play with the other kids?" They may even try to push the child to join more group activities. But we need to clearly separate two things: shyness and self-sufficiency. Shyness means wanting to join but feeling afraid or hesitant. Many children, however, simply don't feel the need to join at that moment. They're perfectly content in their own space, doing their own activity. Research in psychology shows strong developmental continuity in this group. A child who can play alone for hours is not showing a lack of social skills. Those are their first mental workouts. A rich imagination in childhood often becomes the foundation for deep analytical thinking in adulthood. The 5-year-old who once built Lego sets alone may grow up to be the engineer. This engineer can debug complex code for 10 straight hours without a break. Or the writer who can lock themselves in a room for months to finish a novel. The form of their inner interest changes, but the core remains the same. So, what truly allows them to maintain that remarkable focus and calm for so long? To answer that, we have to peel back the biological layer and look directly into their nervous system. In 2014, the University of Virginia published a shocking psychology experiment. They placed participants in an empty room, no phone, no books, no windows to look out of, and no one to talk to. The only instruction was, sit still and think for 15 minutes. But there was one small detail. In the room, there was a button. If they pressed it, they would receive a painful electric shock. Before the experiment, participants had clearly said they would pay money to avoid being shocked. So, who would shock themselves on purpose just because they're alone? The results stunned the psychology world. Instead of quietly thinking for 15 minutes, more than 60% of men chose to press the button and shock themselves. And 25% of women also chose to self-administer the painful electric shock. Some even pressed it hundreds of times. Why would they do this? The experiment revealed a harsh truth. For most people's brains, being alone with their own thoughts feels like torture. When there are no outside distractions, a brain system called the default mode network switches on. Without the ability to guide it properly, this system can create restlessness, discomfort, and emptiness so intense that people would rather feel physical pain than sit with mental silence. But if you placed a self-sufficient introvert in that room, that shock button would collect dust. For them, those 15 quiet minutes are not a prison. They are a playground. The reason they can maintain such incredible focus is simple and profound. Their mind is an automatic content-generating machine, always active. While other brains scream for external fuel, messages, noise, and constant attention, their brain uses silence to open maximum bandwidth to the rich inner world. They do not use quiet to beat themselves up with negative thoughts. They use it to assemble ideas like pieces of a complex puzzle. They rethink a life philosophy, carefully examining their core beliefs. They simulate future decisions, playing out scenarios in their mind, or simply enjoy a vivid movie playing inside their own mind, full of detail. They're not better at enduring loneliness. They don't experience it. They genuinely experience satisfaction, excitement, and mental activity within their own thoughts. This is at a level that people addicted to outside noise may never understand. This self-sufficiency is the root of their strength, a deep well of resilience. It shapes 3 of the clearest differences in how they move through the modern world. Point 1. Relationships are a choice, not a rescue plan. Look at how most people move through social life, seeking connection. Many enter friendships, romantic relationships, or groups from a shaky position. This is because they carry a sense of lack, an internal void. Deep down, their motivation for connection is often compensation. They seek someone to quiet their loneliness and fear of being left behind. In psychology, connecting from a state of deficiency often leads to codependency, and you are more likely to lower your own standards, compromising your values. But the self-sufficient introvert approaches relationships already full, because their inner emotional ecosystem is complete and thriving. They never cling to a crowd just to escape an empty Saturday night. When they choose to spend time with you, it's a real compliment. They're there because they truly value who you are, your mind, your depth, not because they need a tool to fill a gap within themselves. This removes people-pleasing, social pressure, and herd mentality from the equation. They may have fewer relationships, but the quality is as pure as it gets. Point 2. An exceptional emotional shock absorption system. We live in a hyper-reactive era, susceptible to emotional contagion. When a crowd faces a crisis, bad news, or workplace drama, panic and anger spread like a virus, infecting everyone. Group emotion can swallow people whole, overwhelming individuals. But the self-sufficient introvert has a psychological buffer, a natural stoicism. Between external stimulus and internal response, they create space, a pause, because they constantly self-analyze and rely on the default mode network. Their brain doesn't allow snap reactions, impulsive responses. Instead of getting pulled into emotional chaos right away, they take one step back. They bring the messy data into their inner laboratory for examination. They separate panic from objective facts, discerning truth. As a result, in the most heated moments, they remain composed. When people around them are overwhelmed and shouting, they're often the calmest person. They act like a quiet anchor, absorbing the chaos and decoding it, and delivering the sharpest response, clear and precise. Point 3. The ultimate power of being willing to walk away. If you study negotiation, you'll learn a core rule, a fundamental principle. The weaker party is the one who needs the deal more, a fundamental truth in all negotiations. In toxic workplaces or manipulative relationships, this dynamic is often brutally exploited. One of the most powerful weapons manipulators use is the threat of isolation. They target the deep-seated fear of exclusion, of losing status, of being utterly alone. But how do you threaten someone with isolation when they already see solitude as a kingdom? The self-sufficient introvert holds an invisible, yet ultimate advantage in these situations. This advantage is their profound readiness to simply leave. Because they are not addicted to external attention, their boundaries are made of steel. They can calmly walk away from bad negotiations or groups that don't respect their value. For them, returning to solitude is not a punishment or a failure of any kind. It's simply going back to the safest, most comforting place they know, their own mind. True freedom is not about how many people you can connect with in the world. It's about how many things you can refuse without being afraid to stand alone. If you observe modern culture, one thing becomes strikingly clear and pervasive. Attention itself has almost transformed into a tangible form of currency. Social media relentlessly encourages us to share every aspect of our lives. From our meals and exotic trips to personal achievements, even our sad moments. Posting, getting likes, reading comments, it's all become a normal part of daily existence. Why do so many people feel the compelling need to check in at a famous restaurant? Why share feelings the very moment something significant happens in their lives? Why can not being invited to a gathering feel like a profound personal rejection? Because in this environment, it's dangerously easy to develop a quiet, insidious belief. The belief that if no one sees you, you're inevitably falling behind, becoming irrelevant. If your experience isn't shared, it somehow possesses less inherent value. When personal worth is tied too tightly to outside feedback, like likes, views, and compliments, people begin to depend on that external validation just to feel good enough about themselves. But the self-sufficient introvert usually doesn't operate with this kind of dependency. In psychology, there's a crucial concept called the internal locus of evaluation. This is the profound tendency to judge yourself by your own standards, not outside feedback. It means they internally decide what is meaningful, what is enough, and what success truly means for them. When they read a great book, they might simply close it and sit there, deeply thinking. They do not feel the urge to post a photo of the cover to prove they are reading. When they finish a personal project, they feel satisfied because they know they did well, not because someone else approved or offered a public commendation. If they cook a good meal, they simply enjoy it, savoring the flavors and the effort. If they reach a small personal goal, they acknowledge it privately within themselves. That profound joy doesn't depend on whether anyone else witnessed it or not. This does not imply they hate social media or actively avoid community engagement. They are perfectly capable of sharing and connecting with others when they choose. But for them, external attention is not the fundamental foundation of their self-worth. It is entirely optional, a pleasant addition, not a required element for them to feel meaningful. You could succinctly sum up this entire perspective with a single, powerful idea. When someone truly accepts and profoundly understands themselves deeply and completely, outside validation becomes a nice-to-have, a bonus, rather than an absolute necessity. It's no longer something they desperately need for their psychological survival and well-being. They possess the genuine freedom to join the crowd whenever they desire. They can share their insights and creativity when it feels genuinely right, when the moment truly calls for it. But if no one claps, if no one takes notice of their contributions, they remain steadfast and composed. Their foundation isn't built upon the fleeting opinions or approving eyes of other people. Instead, it's meticulously constructed on an unshakable bedrock of inner stability and self-assurance. When we step back and meticulously observe the full, intricate picture, one profound truth becomes exceptionally clear. Introversion is primarily about an individual's unique method of processing information and managing their energy levels. Self-sufficiency, on the other hand, is the remarkable ability to not depend on external validation. It's the inner strength to feel inherently valuable, irrespective of what others might think or say. When these two powerful traits, introversion and self-sufficiency, harmoniously combine, they forge extraordinary individuals. These individuals possess an incredibly stable and rich inner life, a true sanctuary within themselves. And from this inner peace emanates a quiet, yet profoundly unique and unwavering confidence. If you find yourself observing people like this from an external perspective, please pause and reconsider. Stop assuming they inherently need to be pulled out more or coaxed into social situations. Not everyone who genuinely enjoys being alone is experiencing a problem or feeling lonely. Not everyone who politely declines an invitation to a party is necessarily sad or isolating themselves. Sometimes, they are simply making a conscious choice. They are choosing the specific environment that best recharges their unique energy. True self-sufficiency is never about building an impenetrable fortress to keep every single person out of your life. It is simply the quiet recognition that you possess a deeply peaceful sanctuary within yourself when the world overwhelms you. You absolutely do not need to feel guilty for fiercely protecting your energy and walking away from draining social expectations. Choosing to spend a peaceful evening alone is a beautiful act of preservation rather than a flaw to be repaired. What does your internal voice actually whisper when you manage to silence all the heavy demands of the outside world? If this resonated with you, leave a brief thought in the comments so we can honor your very unique journey. May your quiet spaces always bring you vivid clarity and feel exactly like returning to a deeply welcoming home.